Well, I've been asked if I would like to say something about a favorite moment in history, and also a favorite moment in Christian history. So those are, of course, two different things. But one of my favorites in history is the last year of the life of Alexander the Great. He, as you probably remember, was king of Macedon, which has always been a province of Greece. And he was schooled by Aristotle. His father was Philip, king of Macedon. Then he became king. And around 330 before Christ, he decided that he was finally going to lead the Greek city-states in a joint army to go against the Persians to punish them for the two terrible invasions of Greece that they had engaged in, visited upon Greece, the first in 490 before Christ, where they were defeated finally at the Battle of Marathon by the Athenian army, and the second time under Xerxes in 480 BC, which ended with their defeat in 479 BC. But they had decimated and burnt some of the big city-states, including the city of Eretria and the city of Athens itself. And then, if you remember your history, Themistocles, the admiral of the Athenian navy, met them outside, south of Athens, and destroyed their fleet. So anyway, Alexander comes along, and he has decided that he has a mission, which is to take revenge for the decimation upon Greece that the Persians had practiced, and also to bring the civilizing message. You know, he very much was a disciple of Aristotle, to the Persian Empire. So he begins his invasion of the Persian Empire around 333 before Christ, and victory after victory after victory on the military field finally conquers the entire empire. And at some point around 323 before Christ, the veterans that had come with him from the Macedonian army, these poor guys were, you know, all cut up and you know, but they loved him and they were loyal to him. And so he says, okay, it's time to send them home. He is now emperor of Persia too. And he says, it's time to send them home, and we're going to give each one of them a big reward, and they can go back to their families. And so, of course, the question then becomes, you know, these were vets, 10-year vets, and they had senior positions in the empire, and so they had to be replaced. And so he starts to replace them with local leaders, Persians, you know, Babylonians, whatever it was. And at that point, the Greek veterans rebel. And Alexander is in Babylon, and they rebel, and he set up his army is on the plains outside of Babylon, which are called the plains of Opis, O-P-I-S. And they rebel. And there's a 3-day rebellion. And Alexander, of course, does not want to order his faithful veterans to be slaughtered for their rebellion. And they're rebelling because they're saying, we came here to civilize. These people are barbarians, and now the great king is putting barbarians in places of leadership, and we don't like it. That's why they rebelled. So what does Alexander do? He goes into his tent outside of Babylon, and according to the history of the historians of the time, he basically disappears into his tent for 3 days. He will not order an attack against the rebels. He's just in his tent. And little by little, the vets, who are also emotional and their comrades at arms, begin to regret their ways. And they begin to come outside of his tent and call to him from outside his tent, forgive us, you know, great king, and to lay down their arms. So at the end of the 3rd day, he finally emerges from his tent, and he orders only 2 or 3 of the ringleaders to be put to death. The rest he forgives. And his answer is to have a great banquet for 9,000 representatives from all the provinces of his empire. because he wants to put forward that civilizing spirit again, that spirit of comradeship between different peoples and so forth. So it takes a few months to prepare this, but finally the banquet is held, and it's a multi-day banquet, as the events were, and 9,000 leaders from all over his vast empire. Imagine, from Egypt, from North Africa, from Greece, from all the way to Afghanistan and India, etc. 9,000 of these representatives assemble on the plains of Opis to have this banquet. And he comes out, and this is what you can Google, and he delivers a speech which has remained in history as the Oath of Alexander. And you can Google the Oath of Alexander, and you will find what he said. So he assembles all of them, and what does he say? I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. He says, first of all, for me, there is no such thing as a Greek and a barbarian, because the Greeks, when they invaded the Persian Empire, really considered them barbarians. They considered them slaves. Remember that at Thermopylae in 480 BC, when King Leonidas of Sparta faces a 1,000,000-man army under Xerxes, with his 300 and about 2,000 paramilitaries, what is his battle cry? Remember, he says to his men, we are free men. We are fighting like free men. So you got the East versus the West there. The spirit of freedom, of deliverance in the West, opposing the spirit of slavery that comes from the East. So Alexander says in the Oath of Alexander, he says, for me there is no such thing as a Greek and a barbarian. There are barbarians who are Greek, and there are Greeks who are barbarians. So, and he goes on, he says, for me, what counts is your personal virtue. In Greek, the word is areti, which can also mean righteousness. What counts is your personal virtue, your personal righteousness. And then, listen to what he says. When you all understand that we are children of God, parenthesis, not the 12 Olympian gods, he's referring to one God. When you all understand that we are children of God, then you will also understand that we are to behave to each other as brother to brother. This is a precursor of the message of Jesus. The ancient Greeks, with all their philosophers, Socrates and Aristotle and the Stoics and everybody else, got as far as virtue and righteousness. They did not get as far as love, which was the message of Jesus. But it's the next step down. So he is preaching in the year 323 before Christ, and this is 1 year before he died, Alexander. When you all understand that we are all children of God, you will also understand that we are to behave as brother to brother. That's a favorite of mine.